First, can Keir Starmer turn things around for Labour with his new milestone pledges? 0207 862 2222 is the number. So from Labour's point of view, he's unveiling 6 promises to voters, which he says are ambitious yet achievable and will improve people's lives across the country. The Conservatives say, no, this is a reset, reboot, because he's panicking, he's suffered these horrible polls, his approval ratings are on the floor, etc. But the key thing is, let's have a look at the pledges first before we shoot them down. So, better policing is a big one. A named, contactable police officer for every household. So there will be, I'm just going to draw a police officer here, there will be somebody with their name, and you might even have a number for them. Then you're going to have a way of trying to they've got problems with growth. They promise growth, it's not happening, and we're going to lag on growth. So they're changing the way of measuring it, and they're going to say households will have more spending money. This is a big one. This is properly measurable. 92% of NHS operations carried out within 18 weeks. That's what they say in 18 weeks. Let's watch for that one. You then got new houses, and this is a big one. By 2030, they're going to have 1.5 million. The problem is 2030 takes us past the next general election. So it's like, if you elect us, we'll see what we can do. Net zero, again, 2030 is a lot going on. This is Ed Miliband's thing. That may go wrong. And then the other one is raising the number of 4- and 5-year-old children who are school ready. So this is just 4s and 5s, the younger, the primary school kids, getting to school without needing to be potty trained, which has been an issue. I don't know. What do you think, Henry?
Out of that list, I think the key pledges that the public's going to judge them on are NHS waiting list. It's the number one concern. It always has been. Housing is key. People get really, really upset when they or their children cannot get a house, cannot rent one, cannot buy one. I don't think people are going to judge them on net zero. Marginally getting kids school ready, and migration. Because these are the things, I think, that partly because they've been encouraged by the media, people will judge them on that. They become totemic, and that is how the government is going to be judged in the next 5 years.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned migration. I mean, given that is pretty much the number one issue of why we seem to have open borders in some parts of the country, why is that not in their list?
I think it's not in their list because they haven't put a figure, as David Cameron did all those years ago, that he was going to get net migration down to the tens of thousands. Because even though we've now left the European Union, it's supposedly within our control. Business wants the visas. They still want to be able to apply for and get the visas they want, especially for the shortage occupational list. And of course, you've got other government departments, including education and business, who are saying, we need these visas in order to keep growing. And that's why they don't want to risk hostage to fortune on that.
Yeah, are they hostages to fortune, Nadine, that list, or is it just all too far away to judge?
Well, most of it's undeliverable. I mean, the NHS have already said that can't happen. And, you know, they've just given £22 billion to the NHS, which just drops into a black hole with no deliverables, no guaranteed outcomes for that £22 billion. And I can tell you, having been a health minister for 2 years, it's very difficult to get the NHS to commit to anything. And one of the reasons for that is that Wes Streeting, who's the new Secretary of State, and the government have no levers of power within the NHS to pull. The agreement that happened in 2012 under Andrew Lansley, which was the new basis on which the relationship between the government and the NHS worked, actually took away all the powers that ministers had over the NHS. So they can say anything that they like until they bring forward a bill for reform of the NHS and the relationship between NHS and government. There's nothing that politicians can do, and this was our problem, and it is their problem. There is nothing they can do. There is nothing they can do to compel the NHS to deliver. So they can give them all the money they ask for, and they don't have to promise anything in return. Yeah,
I mean, I guess also it's a huge battleship, and it's really hard to steer. And I notice there's no timescale on the NHS. There may be one that I've missed, but it's like almost like a dream, isn't it? The policing one's massive, though, because surely isn't policing the one thing you get results quickly? You put more police on the streets and you catch criminals.
And it is easier to... I mean, we made a pledge, and I think it was 20,000 more police officers on the street. That was one of our pledges in the 2019 election, or rather one of Boris's pledges, and I think we did that. So that we do
Having
have
cut
more,
a lot, that's the trouble, isn't it?
We do have more police on the streets. So there are a number of issues. Police and crime commissioners, there are a number of issues with regard to policing, recruitment. Retention is the biggest problem in policing at the moment. We train police officers, they join the police force, and then they either go on long-term sick or they leave very quickly. That's a massive problem in terms of workforce.
And also getting the right police officers, because there's an awful lot out there, sadly, who are not...
community police officers.
Well, no, but, if you look at the Commissioner of Met Police, he said that there are over 1,000 police officers I need to get rid of, and I can't get rid of them.
Well, he's able to sack them now, I think, but, he's going through them one at a time. It's taking quite a long time.
And many of those policing of those, but it should be said, are not actually fully trained police officers. They're going to be community support officers.
That's correct, yeah.
So they're not, they are easier to recruit, and it's a fantastic for career anybody who wants to go into it, but retention is a massive problem.
John is in Worcestershire, and do you think this is a big panicky reboot, or is this what you want to see, John?
I just tend to think that all this is disingenuous, which is another word for lying, isn't it?
Well, it's a polite word for lying, yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at what happened with the pensioners, what he said was they're not going to touch the triple lock. They didn't touch the triple lock, but what they did was take the heating allowance away, which had exactly the same effect as taking away the triple lock. So I think that's basically the problem here. Nobody's going to trust a word the bloke says, because they know that what he's going to do is he's not going to lie, but what he's going to do is going to have exactly the same effect as if he does lie.
I mean, the big one that's missing is this growth. The growth. They said that we'd be growing faster than other comparable economies. Yeah. Now, it isn't possible to promise that as a government. You can't...
But the question is, Jeremy, what does that really mean to people's ordinary everyday lives? I mean, you cannot eat GDP. It might sound good, it might be good to measure yourself against what the other members of the G7 or the G20 are doing, but if people don't feel better each and every day, they can't get to work properly, they're spending too much on their train fare, they can't buy a house, their kids can't get into the right school, then GDP can
but
just
it's not,
go hang.
OK, if we had massive growth, then we could worry about that.
But that's as shallow as Rishi Sunak saying we're going to reduce inflation. If we could reduce inflation, we stop inflation going up in the first place. These are empty promises that governments simply cannot deliver.
Yeah. OK, John, thank you very much. Flora in Nottinghamshire, is this sign of a Labour panic already, Flora?
Yes, I think so. I don't think he's going to make a blind bit of difference. He's let a lot of people down in this country. The pensioners were taking away the winter fuel allowance. Now, that's one of the things that's going to hit me hard. I've got COPD and really, really bad arthritis. And I'm going to have to delve into life savings because what the income I've got coming in monthly is not going to cover my heating bills. And at 85, I'm definitely having my heating on. And I begin to despair about this country. Then we've got the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. She just reminds me of a silly little kid playing at politics. She's not much good. I don't think she'll last long.
Well, she's only... Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I don't feel I've sort of seen much of her, so I'm not sure what she's going to be offering. She's waiting for them to fall apart, I think.
That's part of the problem. You haven't seen much of her, and it's... Kemi needs to get out there and start taking the fight to Labour, which she isn't doing, and holding Labour to account. And she isn't doing that at the moment. Now, I want to support Kemi because she's a leader of the party of which I was a cabinet minister and a minister. And I want to support her, but she needs to get out there and start...
The question is, get out there and say what? I mean, they haven't really got a policy platform.
Well, and that was the bizarre thing about the whole leadership election. I would always support the Conservative membership, but this time they've made their own beds. And I'll make a prediction that in 2 years' time, there'll be somebody else who's leader of the Conservative Party. And I think that person will be Alex Burkhardt, because if you've read the plot and you read Downfall, you will know that they all are Tory, the people who organise the party.
Alex Burkhardt.
They always have someone that they push forward, and they always have a spare. And Alex Burkhardt is their spare, and they were working to put him in, and he'll be there.
This is very good news for Labour. This is very good news for Labour, because, of course, the more turmoil that your old friends in Conservative CCHQ cause themselves, the more time you have to make it.
It's not in CCHQ, but they just can't help themselves.
OK, after the break, your calls on whether Keir Starmer's new pledges on everything from crime to the NHS can turn things around. 020 7862 2222. Irina's got in touch on Facebook. See, she says, give Starmer a chance. The last 14 years have been full of lies, deceit and broken promises. Angela in Derbyshire, what do you think of that? He needs a bit more time.
I agree. I do agree. I vote Conservative generally as a rule. However, and I've never voted Labour, but I do think he's not been given enough time. And I think within the first, during this time, I think he's done a lot already. He's actually had planes off the ground when it comes to immigration, which is more than what the Conservative government did.
Planes off the ground? No, sorry, what you mean?
We're talking record deportations, including the people to Nigeria, to Jamaica, to...
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
But not Rwanda, yeah.
Yeah.
But what, Angela, these pledges, right? I don't know if you remember Ed Miliband, when he was trying to win that election in 2015, had a thing called the Ed Stone, and it was a massive piece of stone, and he wrote pledges on it. And they none of them, when people looked at it, they didn't really mean anything. Do you think these ones mean something?
I do, absolutely.
What, better policing?
Well, yes, because there needs to be much better policing going on. There's a massive divide, isn't there, between the public and the police. So I think that's important. And I think houses and the NHS definitely needs to be sorted out from the ground up or from the top down, whichever way it's got to be done. I think he's actually looking at what matters for the people, and I never thought I'd say that, really.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Thank you so much. Betty in North Yorkshire, do you agree with Angela? His heart's in the right place?
No, I don't. And the final statement from the last lady that they're doing the right thing for the NHS is wrong. Our daughter works in the NHS in Halifax, and throwing more money at them is not the answer. It needs a really good shake-up. But in this area, where there is prevalent farming, we saw what happened to the poor farmers during the foot and mouth disease, how they were absolutely brought to the ground, and now look what they've done to him. I don't think they have a clue.
Yeah, the farmers thing, I don't, because if you're going to annoy two groups of people, I wouldn't, if I was a politician, I would probably think I'm not going to annoy pensioners or farmers, because farmers have got guns as well. I really,
It's more than two groups. I mean, small businesses, GP practices,
any employer,
pensioners.
Can you explain it, Henry? Why would they take this battle on?
We've got, as Tony Blair talked about the feral beasts of the media, all those years ago. It's a constant news cycle. We're constantly looking to. You'll have been at the end of this, put the government in the crosshairs or ministers in crosshairs and say, why haven't you done this? See, we want growth, we want greater investment in our public services, but somebody's going to have to pay for it. And every single group that's targeted will say, well, no, we haven't got the bandwidth, we haven't got the money, look somewhere else. And a government has to choose. And Keir Starmer is finding out very, very quickly that whatever choice, whatever alley you go down, somebody will say this is the wrong choice.
But Henry, there is a choice. There is a choice. And the other side of that coin is cut public spending.
Yep.
So what Keir Starmer has done is just had a choice, made the choice that he wants to raise more money and just keep pumping more money into public services, which are failing. The big question was, where can I reform public services and save money also?
Right.
Because if you just keep raising money for people as we do and keep
but when we look back
in,
at the last 14 years, the period post-austerity, so when Osborne and Cameron came in, can you point to any public services that were properly reformed to the satisfaction of the British people, where they would say, yeah, tick, I can see that they managed to cut public spending, reform, and the service and the output is better? I struggle.
So that's what the whole purpose of the new big health bill was, the Annesley reforms in 2012. There was the 20 billion challenge, if you remember, Nicholson 20 billion challenge. That I believe that was met. There was a savings of 20 billion put into the NHS at the same time as the Lansley reforms were delivered. And as I said before, the problem with the Lansley reforms was that what we wanted to do...
No one could understand them.
We wanted to depoliticise the NHS so that it didn't become a political football, that the NHS were wholly independent, that government could say it's not us, it's any government, Labour or Conservative could say it's not us, it's actually the NHS. What that's done is basically mean the government still get the blame. All we have an obligation to do as a government is hand over the money, but we have no power.
Understood. Sylvia's in Durham. Hi, sorry to keep you waiting. Sylvia, what do you think? Is he doing his best, or are these pledges just an insult?
I think Barry's insulted everybody who voted for him. And the reason I say is that because when they got into power, the first people they attacked was the OAPs. Now they're going in on the unemployed, the physical and mentally disabled. And may I just say one thing to the lady person on your panel?
Well, that is Nadine Dorries,
quite a lot of people who were unemployed became unemployed during the COVID virus, and because of their age can now no longer get a job. And so that it's not because everybody's lazy and they don't want work, it's because quite a lot of them cannot get work.
Okay.
And of course, the disabled people, one of the Labour persons said on the news that they want to get the long-term sick back and employed. I'd like to know how they're going to do that if they're sick.
Listen, Sylvia, thank you. We've got to pause there because of our ad break, but thank you for all your calls. It just shows that, you know, Labour, early days for them, but they are really battling what
expectations are getting higher and higher, Jeremy.
Headwinds. It's headwinds, as they say. They're really up in the eye of the storm.